What's up guys, welcome back to the MSR workshop. So in today's video we're going to be doing something that I have put off for a little while, and that is going to be preparing my CO2 laser for winter. So stick around, I think you'll like this. So in today's video, we're going to be doing a couple things. We're going to be installing a heater, we're going to be installing a flow control meter, and then the third thing, we're also going to be installing an inline pump. And the pump for it is going to be to make it so we don't have to run this all the time. So let's take a look at some of the things that I've got out for this laser setup. So the first thing is this aquarium heater, and I opted for the 50 watt. Now I know some people said that they could get a higher watt, which maybe keep up with a really cold weather a little bit better, but I'm afraid it'd be too big to fit where we're going to put it today. So the next thing is this pump. Now what the pump does is it circulates the water through the chiller tank as well as the laser tube, and it replaces the chiller so you don't have to turn it on, so this will just be running all the time. And these are some brass fittings that actually come with it, and then some Teflon tape. And then these little black guys here, these are little plastic replacement like folding chair leg cover things, and they're like 1.25 inches. And I'll put a link in the description below of everything that I use. But what I did here is I cut an 1 1/8 hole in the bottom and then use this little rubber grommet that it's going to fit right in the top of this where I cut out the top. And then I'm going to cut a hole right there in the top there, and I'll run all my cords through, actually say cords, one cord where it's the heater cord. And then last but not least, this is our flow control indicator. Now, these little dumb things are kind of expensive. I say expensive, everything is relative, but I'll throw a link in the description below on this one. But they do make one, which I may upgrade later, which looks very similar. It looks to be a little bit higher quality than this one, but the cool thing about it is it comes with a digital readout of the actual water temperature that is going through your system. And the nice thing about that is it gives you an actual indicator of what your water temperature is at all times, whether you're using the chiller or not. And especially if you're running the heater, this will actually tell you what your water temperature is running through this flow control device. So moving on here, we are going to install this little plastic foot that I cut the top off. And if you find that it fits a little bit tight, I have taken a torch here and just kind of heated the plastic up a little bit, and then it'll get a little softer so you can fit it over these threads. Now, if you don't want to do that, it still fits, but it does fit pretty tight. So if you push it down, it doesn't come off super easy. But I suppose that's a good thing because it's not. Now we're going to grab this little rubber grommet that I got, and I'm going to cut a little hole in the top. And you don't need to cut a very big hole, because the idea is that you want to get it small enough to get the end of your plug through, but not so big that it's going to allow dust and debris to get inside your tank, because you want to keep your tank as clean and debris free. Now it's time to grab our little rubber grommet and shove our end of our plug through the hole that we made. And of course I had to make it a little bit bigger, but not too big, of course, because I don't want to let any dust and debris in. And one thing you'll want to do is once you're done with this, you'll drop your heater in there, and you'll probably have to add water just to make sure that it's completely covered. Now, one video that I saw, instead of using this little rubber grommet, they used the cap to the 1-gallon jug of distilled water that's added to this, and use that as one of the caps instead of what I'm doing here. Either way works, just so you make sure that the top is sealed from any junk that may be floating around your shop. And it's a little bit of a struggle to get that over there, but that's okay because you want it nice and tight. Now we're going to go ahead and drop our heater tube in, but the first thing we'll want to do is kind of go ahead and check it and look at the temperature setting, and the very lowest setting is where you want it, maybe just a tiny bit above. So 18 degrees Celsius is around 64.4, so close to 65 degrees, and I think that's the lowest setting that this goes. And drop it all the way down, just check for fit, and then now you're going to want to go ahead and add more water. So when you add water, you'll want to pull the heater out because it does fit tight enough that the water doesn't pour around it very well. So go ahead and pour it out, fill it up pretty full, and then just check it, because if you get it too full like I did here, you'll have a little bit of a mess when you drop your heater in, because it'll of course make the water go everywhere. Grab the towel because I'm making a mess, and we're going to go ahead and drop it in, let the water flow out. And when you start this thing up and prime it, you'll probably end up having to add a little bit more water once again. But the nice thing of having a cap like this is you can peek on it every so often just to make sure that you've got adequate water submerging the thing, because aquarium heaters need to be submerged at all times or they have the potential of cracking. Fortunately, they're not super expensive, so I may even suggest looking over this at the end of every year. And if it doesn't look perfect, just throw it away and go ahead and buy a new one. Because at the end of the day, it's still a little bit cheaper than replacing your glass laser tube if something were to damage it. Next, we're going to go ahead and put Teflon tape on our little pump. And make sure you get your Teflon tape in the right direction when you put those on. And these little brass fittings come with a little washer that goes inside. And then I used a 24mm wrench to screw all these in tight. And when you go to hook this up, make sure that you're plugging everything in the right direction. There is a flow indicator on the top. So on this part, I found a good spot where I want to mount it to the wall. And what I did is I took a little piece of plastic banding strap tape and then just screwed it to the back of my wall. Now once again, what I pointed to on the top there is an arrow for your flow direction. So you want it flowing towards the machine and away from the chiller. And here's a little close-up of what it looks like mounted to the wall. Now let's go ahead and get the tubing installed. So what I'm doing here is I am going to go ahead and cut the tube where I think it's good, and I'm using these little clips. These are just kind of like sandwich bag clips, just so I don't have water running everywhere all over my garage. I still ended up making a little bit of a mess, but it wouldn't be as bad if I just decided to clamp it or clip it and then just let it drain out of the tube. And by this way too, it helps not introduce quite as much air in the line, which you want to avoid. So I'm getting my little distilled water jug here, and I'm hoping to use some of the water, not to waste too much. I know distilled water isn't too expensive, but I didn't have another jug. So I wanted to save as much as I could because I didn't know how much I'm going to have to add after I reprime the line. So I'm just going to let that hang there. And I'm going to cut this section off too here, and this is going to be used, that little section, for the flow control indicator. So jumping back over to the pump, I'm installing the flow control meter and these little hose clamps. And once again, I used my clamp to keep the water from going everywhere. And then I just go ahead and tighten those down. And then I use a section of tubing to actually connect it to the pump going on the other direction here. So get that guy on, cut that a little bit shorter, and make sure I had my little clamps on as well. tighten our last clamp down, and now we're done with this side, and we'll add a little thing to keep it from flopping over. So this last little part might look a little funny, but what I did here is I got one of those kitchen straws, those silicone kitchen straws, and I'm actually sucking on the pump to prime it. So I'm back priming it, and this will just help make this pump work a little better, because they say this is not a self-priming pump. Not sure exactly what that means. It probably means there's not a vacuum on it to actually suck the water through until it's actually primed. So kind of primed it this way, and it seemed to work pretty good. So next we're connecting the other end really quick, and there was still a bit of air in the line. It's not the end of the world, but you want to try to get out as much as possible. So what I had to do next, once I got this all tightened down, is I actually turned on the chiller itself. And what that did is the chiller actually forced water through the system to get most of the air out. And I turned it on and off a number of times to get all the air bubbles out. And then I turned the little pump on by itself, because the little pump wasn't quite powerful enough to push all of the air bubbles through. And so then I opened up the back of my laser, just double checking to make sure that all the air bubbles were out of the laser tube itself. So here's a quick walkthrough of the whole system connected, and this is with the pump going, and you can see the indicator moving right there. So starting off at the bottom of the laser, we have got our inlet and outlet, and that little green area right there. That is my remote temperature sensor. And it's this guy here. This is Ubiot. Not even going to try to pronounce that. That little round thing on top is an ambient light sensor. And this thing does a whole bunch of stuff. So it says accuracy plus or minus 0.3 degrees Celsius. And it comes with that temperature probe there. It's connected, and it's also got one built in, so you can do two readings. You can get just your ambient air temperature, and then you can also get probe temperature. The probe is waterproof, so you can put it inside your tank. I opted just to tape it to the outside of the tubing, so at least I'll know that, if something were to dip down, I will know about it. And then it's app controlled, so you can get readings from wherever you are at work. You can set alarms, so if it gets to a certain temperature, it'll send you a notification and an alarm to let you know that, hey, you're getting kind of close to the temperature that, could put your glass tube at risk. And then for people that use these for other things, you can get all kinds of different sensors that'll plug in. I even think it's got a humidity sensor built in as well. Really, really cool. Runs about $79, so it is probably the most expensive part of this whole system. And it's not necessary, but I wanted something that I could check temperature remotely, or before I go to bed, or say if I wake up in the middle of the night for something, I can just pull it up and say, hey, what's my garage temperature or my shop temperature, just to make sure something's not going to freeze. Because I know for me, this week is supposed to get down to about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, so yes, definitely want to have something like this in place. Alright guys, I hope you liked that. That was actually extremely easy, a lot easier than I thought it would be. But we took a baseline temperature, it was around 62 degrees. And so we'll come back here in about 45 minutes and continue to check it. But the beauty of this wireless one is that I can check it anywhere, and it'll send me alerts, and I can pre-program any set alert temperature that I would like. I will be sure and leave all of the pieces and parts that I use down in the description. It's not very expensive to do this setup. It's very simple, and I'm not yet to the point where I trust any coolants that are used in the system. I know OMTech, this laser brand, has just come out with a winterizing coolant, but if you notice the price on it, it's pretty expensive. And on an 80-watt laser, this took almost about 3 gallons to fill it up. And I'm guessing it's around $52, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less per gallon. So quite expensive, whereas this was pretty affordable. And it sure beats replacing a laser tube, which is about $500. So anyways, if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, leave them below and stay tuned for the next video that I make. Thanks.